안녕하세요. That means hello in Korean. For this presentation, I will be talking about my chosen topic, which is how K-dramas set unrealistic expectations on adolescent relationships in Western society. So K-drama is an abbreviated term for Korean drama shows. In the past 5 years, there has been a significant increase in popularity, and in Australia alone, according to statistics by Statistica.com, there has been a 37.2% increase. Culture is best defined as a way of living. It doesn't necessarily just refer to a particular race or a language, but it also refers to the beliefs and values, the traditions and customs, and the socially accepted norms of a society. In recent years, the Western world has become more familiar with the Korean culture thanks to the increase in overseas audience. Through platforms such as YouTube, Netflix, Viki, which is another streaming site, Facebook and Instagram, the Korean entertainment world has become more easily accessible to audiences worldwide. Socialization is this significant and complex process in life which humans go through, learning the language, behaviors, values, morals, ethics, and religions of the particular culture they grow up in. There are 4 main agents of socialization, and they are the school, the family, the peer group, and the media. For this study, it is more focused on the media aspect of the socialization process. The influence of media can be both positive and negative depending on the kind of message that it is portraying to an audience. For my primary methods of research, I decided to do a personal reflection, conduct interviews with 3 individuals from Gen Z and who are in relationships and familiar with Korean dramas, and also a content analysis of 2 romance K-dramas focusing on the portrayal of unrealistic expectations. I chose these specific methods as I aimed to use a combination of both personal experience, content analysis, and the experience of others to achieve a variety of answers to help with my research. To add to the cross-generational aspect of this study, I also interviewed my grandmother, who also watches Korean dramas. For my first primary method, I wrote a short personal reflection about my personal experience with Korean dramas. So I have completed 63 Korean drama series, and I'd say at least 40 of them portray unrealistic expectations that can affect relationships. So I've noticed that in my own life that K-dramas have had a major impact, and they are both positive and negative. So with the negative impact, I have set unrealistic expectations in my life about my own relationships, such as, I'll never get a guy as good as him because I love these Korean drama actors so much, and other things such as I've become more emotional and sensitive as a person as well due to K-dramas and sad scenes that are portrayed, and it's affected me and definitely changed some part of me. But looking from more a positive aspect, I have decided to start learning Korean. For my second primary method, I conducted interviews with 3 individuals who are in Generation Z, are currently in relationships, and are familiar with Korean dramas. The first question that was asked is, do you think that relationships in Korean dramas are over-exaggerated, and if so, why? I highlighted the important parts from their responses, such as unrealistic high expectations of men, models, girls want what they see on screen, doesn't show the bad parts, and unrealistic situations. For the second question, do you think that relationships in Korean dramas set unrealistic expectations on relationships in Western society? And if so, why? Relationships are portrayed as very fictional and unrealistic. Scenarios of how they meet are unrealistic, and in reality it would be much weirder. So it's too exaggerated in what happens. Third question, I asked, do K-drama relationship expectation factors affect your relationship in any way? If so, if not, why? 2 of them said no, but 1 of them said at first. She imagined a lot of K-drama romance scenes for her own relationship with her significant other. And for the 4th and final question, in reality, do you think that relationships are like how they are portrayed in Korean dramas? And the first person said, too many effects, it's too unreal. it is portrayed incorrectly at times. Similar situations, but not as exaggerated as Korean dramas are, and it is completely blown out of proportion. For the cross-generational aspect of this research, I decided to interview my grandmother, who also watches Korean dramas, and she provided me with a lot of detailed responses. So the first question I asked her was, what do you like about Korean dramas? And she said it is unique compared to American, European and Australian dramas. For the second question, the scenes that depict relationships in romance K-dramas, are they anything like how relationships were when you were an adolescent? And she said that scenes that depict relationships in romance K-dramas, I would say, are not very similar to how they were when I was an adolescent. However, the more adult dramas can depict relationship problems such as divorce and domestic violence. The more youthful K-dramas, she said, are quite exaggerated in the way that they portray relationships. For the third question, do you think that K-dramas set unrealistic expectations on adolescent relationships, and if so, why? She said there are very exaggerated scenes, and she can see why young people can be influenced by these. And it's also mainly because the relationships that are depicted may seem ideal and satisfactory in a young person's perspective. For my third primary method, I did a content analysis of an episode from 2 different romance Korean dramas. The first drama I decided to analyze was called Touch Your Heart, which is a romantic comedy. And from my analysis, I was able to observe and identify unrealistic scenes that may place expectations and raise up hopes of young people in their own relationships. Production aspects such as background music being changed to a more light-hearted and romantic genre once there was a romantic scene. The next episode that I analysed was an episode from a drama called Boys Over Flowers, and it is a romance and it is quite dramatic. So there were unrealistic situations depicted such as kidnapping, lost in a snowstorm, trying to find a necklace, male leaves on a private jet, all in the one episode. Even in regards to the production aspect, there was a lot of dramatic music and camera angles just adding to the effect of the unrealisticness of it. For my first secondary source, I found a university report titled The Unrealistic Weeds of Love and Romance, the Korean Drama and the Flower Boy Genre, written by an individual named Colby Y. Mioz. She discussed the unrealistic expectations of love, and she also analysed 2 Korean dramas, and she also talked about the ideology of the romance utopia. People's standards of romance appear within class struggles of the meanings of consumption, intimacy, and technologies of leisure. In my second secondary source, I used a 2017 article by Thirst, written by Christina Wong, and it was titled, When How You Love is Shaped by Korean Dramas, Don't Expect a Happy Ending. This quote that stood out to me was, but something was amiss. I'd developed an unhealthy dependency on these dramas because of the lack of any action in my own life. With no knight in shining armor in sight, I'd turned to these Korean dramas for company, and in return they had been planting unrealistic expectations of love in me. She also named 5 expectations that are imposed on relationships. Not all of these points were serious, but these are the kinds of expectations that can be posed by Korean dramas. For my third secondary source, I used another online article, and this one was by kpopstars.com, and it was titled K-drama romances set dangerous expectations on love. K-drama romances provide a hopeful fantasy in a cynical world, and there's nothing wrong with that as long as you realize they are fiction. So in this article, they talked about how there are expectations, but it depends on how you take it, if you treat them as fiction or as non-fiction. It talks about how dramas are very different to real-life situations, as evident in that quote. For my fourth secondary source, I screenshotted results from a survey that was conducted last year about Korean dramas and the popularity overseas. And in this first image, we can see the common age ranges that watch Korean dramas. The biggest age group that watches K-dramas, as recorded in this result, of 40.4%, is 18 to 24. and 32.9% is the 25 to 34 age. In the next photo, we can see if these people are of Korean descent, and as you can see, 97.6% of people said that they are not of Korean descent, so we can see that this survey was predominantly answered by people who are not of a Korean background. I was able to link this whole ideology to Elkind's theory of adolescent egocentrism. The two key parts were imaginary audience and personal fable. So there was a statement from a video that said adolescents' tendency to feel peers are constantly watching their performance, much like how actors are watched. And personal fable is when a teenager feels like the story of his or her life is unique and special. And sometimes adolescents want to feel like they're in a K-drama, and that is probably also why K-dramas can have an effect on adolescent relationships and set unrealistic expectations, as some people might want others to view their relationship as perfect and ideal. In conclusion, I have found that K-dramas can place unrealistic expectations on adolescent relationships in Western society. We have now found that K-dramas can negatively affect adolescent relationships and set unrealistic expectations on them. 감사합니다. That means thank you in Korean, and I've also placed on this slide a list of recommendations of Korean dramas if anyone is interested.